I need to get out early as well. Hey, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning with Dave just deserting me. There we go. So, a new poll in America finds that 49% of independents and 15% of Republicans think that Trump should end his campaign after he was convicted last week. Interesting. So I know one or two of our supporters will say no, and two of our supporters will say absolutely yes. So there we go. I'd love to hear your comments straight away on this. Go from there. All right. So, Dave,
what are we talking about now?
I was just saying 49% of independent voters and 15% of Republicans think that Trump should end his campaign now he's being convicted.
Oh, well, it's hard to say what's going on down there. It's such a cesspool of nuttiness. And I'll repeat this again. Like, out of 340 million people, who do you got to vote for president? Joe Biden.
Two 80-odd-year-old nutcases.
Yeah. What is it? What's gone on down there? Now,
Yeah.
Trump has almost got a kind of a religious following. Like, he's got this sort of core following that he can't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
No matter what.
That's exactly what it is. The people who follow him, the fact that he's now been found guilty and the fact that he might well go to prison this week just is like buoys them on, doesn't it?
Yeah, you want to, and here's something that would rub salt in the wounds of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, the Democrats pretty much talked him out of continuing his campaign back in 2016. And he was told that he had to amalgamate the Democrats, and Hillary had a slight lead, and he should drop out so that they could beat Trump. And of course, that didn't happen. But the stats say now that if Bernie was in, he would have beat Trump, because Trump versus Bernie would have won, but not Hillary versus Bernie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Or not Hillary versus Trump, pardon me. So they and the situation there is what people don't realize, and what the Democrat Party doesn't realize at the time, or probably even now, that the people were looking for an outlier, somebody that wasn't part of the main political aristocracy, basically.
Well, the reason why Sanders and Trump would have been a different result is because a lot of them were looking at the same, Clinton and Trump were not looking at the same voter block, whereas Sanders and Trump were.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. And the Clinton strategy was all wrong. They expected to win, so they made the statistics fit their projections, because it must be true. And as we knew, everybody was in shock when Trump won. Although I picked Hillary to win the day before the election. The day before the election, I waited till the day before the election to pick Hillary, because I heard I needed a reason to pick one or the other, and when I heard the stock markets were going up because of anticipation of Hillary winning, I thought, well, that they must know something I don't. Well, they didn't.
Well, no, I said right from, you see, early on when there were two contenders left in the Democrats, Clinton and Sanders, I said that it was, if, basically at that stage, the super bloc votes actually outweighed, supported Clinton, whereas the majority of on the floor candidates supported Sanders. and Sanders had a better chance of winning against Trump. I said that right from the outset. You know, the fact that when the election was Clinton versus Trump, Trump was a winner, and I said that right from the outset.
Yeah, well, you were right.
This one I don't know what to call. I can't possibly call. I think it's nuts. I think it's absolutely
well, Biden would have won, I think, rather comfortably, if not for Gaza.
Yeah,
and Ukraine doesn't help either.
Yeah.
But I mean, people probably would have been able to be annoyed about Ukraine, because if you know anything about politics, you know that war didn't have to happen. That the United States could have stopped it at any time before it got going.
Yeah.
All they had to do is make a few guarantees to the Russians about NATO expansion, and we didn't have a war.
Well, here's another interesting.
The Gaza thing is the thing that's going to kill him, and if he doesn't get a handle on that very soon, right now he's trying to force Netanyahu's hand by imposing a peace plan that he says is the Israeli peace plan. Meanwhile, the Israelis don't know anything about it. How about that?
Well, you know, okay, so Trump was found guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records of a part of an election conspiracy that involved covering up $130,000 payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels, whose story of an affair threatened to derail his 2016 presidential campaign. Trump's sentence will be sentenced on 11th of July, and about half of voters oppose a prison sentence for him. 69% think a fine would be appropriate, while 49% think that they should place him on probation.
Well, there's
crazy, absolute crazy. If you or I did those charges, you'd be going straight to jail, and probably for 5 years, and you'd be, you know, not let out, not let out for 3.
Well, I got to say that the Ethics Commission has come down on Trudeau about 3 times, and it doesn't seem to be hurting him too bad. And, so I think politicians are in a different category. If you believe in them, you believe in them. I think there's the commonality between Trudeau and Trump. You don't think of a common theme between them, but they're both actors, basically. One's been on TV as like The Apprentice, that TV show. So he was an actor. Basically, he knows how to act. And Trudeau is a trained actor, a drama teacher. And I think Trump's a better actor, though. I can usually tell when Trudeau is acting. But Trump, sometimes I don't know if he really believes his stuff or not. But what the problem is, what my point here is that they have core followings that will forgive them everything. Yeah, Trudeau's had a bunch of problems with the ethics commissioner, and Trump has had problems with the law, but their core following don't matter to them.
Yeah, their core following basically are just saying, "Oh, you did more of that? Oh, great!" Yeah.
Well, the one thing they don't have in common, Trump has trouble attracting women voters of a middle class. Not Trudeau. He's got a solid following among women.
He's got a solid women. Actually, if women were voting only in the election, probably Trudeau would be the the winner for the next 5 elections.
Yeah. So there's that difference. There's that difference. I don't know what's going to happen to Trump. I don't think anything's going to change. I think it's going to be down to the wire. And I think Biden's biggest problem is bringing back the young voters, because if he doesn't do something about Gaza pretty soon, he's going to lose a lot of young voters. And right now, what's happening in the Democrat Party, the more progressive end of it, which means more younger or more forward-thinking end of the party, is coming down hard on Biden. Biden's core support is older Democrats, which includes a lot of the Jewish population. I think about 70% of the Jewish population of the United States votes Democrat, and they're not about to abandon him soon. But if he starts putting pressure on Netanyahu, he may find a little bit of that vote drift away from him. In the meantime, younger votes are already drifting away from him, and and a lot of the ethnic vote, particularly the Muslims and Arab vote, are drifting away from him.
Muslims and
These
Arab
are in and these are in states that are crucial. So Biden's in a tough spot right now. It was his to lose, and that's what he's trying to do right now. It seems he's trying to lose this.
That's actually an interesting question, because the whole question about Gaza, it may well come down to what's in Gaza. I'm normally fairly convinced fairly early on who's going to win the presidential election. Right at the moment, I'm not convinced at all. I can't call it either way. See, last time.
Normally it comes down to the standard of living. And before Gaza, I would have said Biden and not even thought twice. But now, because of Gaza, like I could see Ukraine was going to be a problem for Biden. He got himself mixed up in that, and he sucked the rest of the West into it. That was bad news. But and he'll have to work on that. But to have Ukraine and Gaza, that's going to really hurt him, particularly Gaza, because he's coming across very, very weak. He keeps telling Israel not to bomb Rafah, and they bomb Rafah. And he says there's a red line, but as soon as they cross the red line, he says, okay, well, there's another one over here. And then when they cross that line, there's another one over here. So his spokespersons are coming across weak. Their answers to the questions of the journalists are weak. And Biden looks weak in the face of the Israeli lobby and Israel. He sees like he's the one that's taking the orders from them. If that continues, that's not going to be thought too well of by the majority of the Americans, and even the ones that are pro-Israel, and the fact that they think that Israel is the 51st state.
Yeah.
There's some real questioning going on there, and Biden is hoping that his old core base that still believes in the things that he's been working on for many years is going to come through and win. If it does, this is the very last time that's going to work, because people are getting younger and they don't.
Well,
they don't
I think the other aspect about Trump is, of course, Trump has a lot of people who support him and seemingly would support him come what may. But I think the reason why Biden won the presidency last time was purely and simply because it was an anti-Trump vote. They didn't want, there was a block of people, an extra 5-6 million people who wanted Trump, and there was an extra 5 or 6 million and then a little bit more that didn't want Trump. And that's what the voting came down to at the end of the day. And are we seeing that again? Probably not. So that's why this election is so difficult to call. And this whole question about Gaza. Okay, so let's talk that Gaza peace thing for a moment. We heard a thing or two about it last Thursday or Friday, and then it seems to have disappeared from the news.
No, what's happened was, and this is bizarre, and I was kind of full of optimism when I heard this. I find finally the U.S. president is forcing the issue. So, and he did. He sounded like that. He come up and he says, "Well, we're going to do this Israeli peace plan. The Israelis have proposed this plan, and we're going to go with it. And Hamas is no longer a threat to Israel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to go for ceasefires and all this other stuff." That was the exact Egyptian peace proposal that was given, I think, last month or something like that. So what Biden's done basically is just taking the Egyptian plan and put Israeli plan on top of it. And what is bizarre here is Netanyahu and his goons don't seem to have known anything about it. They're not happy about this. His coalition says they'll break apart if they go with this peace plan. And it sounds as if, and everybody's kind of speculating, because I watch a lot of news, did Biden's kind of force this on the Israelis? No, the Israelis don't seem to know too much about it. And it's basically just the Egyptian plan that Biden said Israel has proposed. So did Biden say, okay, this is my way of telling you that this is over, take this plan? And he's telling Hamas, though, Hamas has to accept this, seize the day. But what he's really meaning is Israel had better accept this because it's your plan that you didn't know about, but it's your plan, he's saying. It's bizarre, that whole thing. He cannot get his will. They will not pay attention to Biden. When he says there's a red line, they cross it. When he says don't drop bombs, they do. When he says open up the border for more food, they don't. When he tries to, everything's going wrong for him. When he puts the pier out there to bring in more humanitarian aid, there's all kinds of crossings, border crossings from Israel to Gaza, and they can be full of aid, but Israel isn't letting it go through. But Biden's administration saying, oh yes, they are. They're trying their best. So they're trying their best, are they? With several border crossings, land crossings into Gaza, that the United States has to build a pier. A pier.
Your cynicism
during the first storm.
Your level of cynicism in that recent statement just grew and grew and grew and grew.
Well, it's hard not to. I watch a lot of the press conferences, and the one thing that the press conference people do well is add a lot of filler words to their statements, and we know about that from Toastmasters, right? So when they answer, they make the answer a lot longer than it has to be, and they float it around from this place to that place in order to eat up as much time so they don't have to answer as many questions. However, the questions are getting tougher all the time. They're going to start to single out people who don't ask tough questions pretty soon, if they haven't already. Questions like Biden had this red line. Oh, we don't think he's crossed that red line yet. And when the one reporter says, well, how many charred bodies was it going to take for him to tell us where that red line is, or something to that effect? And of course, the spokesperson got, oh, we don't want any. And this is what they keep saying. Well, we don't want any civilians' death. One civilian is too many. It sounds a lot like when they have a mass shooting in the States and the Republicans all say, oh, we have our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims. In other words, we're not going to do anything about it, but we got to say this thoughts and prayers thing.
Yeah. And they do that every single time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So moving on, Bill Gates is creating this new, his company TerraPower is creating this new Natrium nuclear reactor, which is cooled by liquid sodium.
Yeah, so what we're going to have a real problem with going forward is producing power without carbon fuels. We've reduced the amount of carbon we're putting into the atmosphere by switching from coal to natural gas, but that's only a stopgap. That reduces the amount we're putting in, but we still are putting them in. So the United States, for the most part, has switched from, generally speaking, not absolutely, but generally
speaking, states, except in one or two states,
are pushing the natural gas because they found all kinds of it through fracking. So they'll have all kinds of it coming forward. But what has to happen, and it has to happen rather quickly, is a switch to power generation that isn't hitched to carbon fuels. Carbon fuels really are making more and more of a problem in our atmosphere going forward. As a matter of fact, there's new evidence that says, new evidence that says that it might be worse than we think it was. And this isn't from the world that's going to fall apart, people. These are from scientists that have come up with sensitivity, atmospheric sensitivity things. I don't know the science well enough to tell you, but it looks as if it's possible that things may get worse a little faster than we thought they were. And it's impossible for us to turn it around that fast. So what's going to happen is if their predictions are true, then we're going to get a lot more people moving north than are now. We're already having a huge amount of problem with people moving and trying to get into Europe or North America. Well, evidently that's going to continue at a faster rate if these predictions come true, because it's going to make a lot of the areas in the world unlivable. A lot of the very densely populated areas in the world unlivable or less livable. So there's going to be a push by people to come north. That's what makes this particular thing very important, because this Natrium reactor is a nuclear reactor, and this nuclear reactor can be built in a fraction of the time, like in 5 years. I think it can be built in 5 years.
So the other thing about this is it's cooled by liquid sodium, as opposed.
Well, that was part of that. That's what I was getting at. Part of the reason is because it's cooled instead of by water by liquid sodium, and the heat storage is in molten salt. And if you have followed any of the alternate power generation technology, molten salt keeps coming up. Molten salt keeps coming up as a means by which to maintain.
I don't know how this actually. Energy. Yeah, I don't know how this actually stores energy, but yeah, I've seen it a few times coming up. Don't know how it happens, but yeah.
They also talk about molten salt storage of energy when they talk about solar heat directed at if you can get solar reflectors and then aim them at a certain place, and that place would be full of molten salt, so they could be heated up during the day, and that molten salt then could be used at night. You could extract the energy from it during the nighttime when the sun's not out. So that's a very simple use of molten salt. Say, for instance, you have all these reflectors, and they're boiling water, let's say, in a reflector, but some of the reflectors are going after at salt and molten salt. So the salt raises its temperature for a very high, and it tends to be able to hold on to that heat. Then you can use that heat during the nighttime.
Well, they're putting this plant in Wyoming, starting construction of it in June, right? So they're making, and as you say, that's a lot. It's a lot quicker to build using this system compared to standard nuclear plants, which take a lot longer to actually to become active.
And there's also another part of it. It requires plutonium in levels that don't need to be that won't be able to turn into weapon grades uranium or plutonium.
Yeah,
that's another big thing. So you could take this all over the world, and it won't be a nuclear threat. So you can build these everywhere. You can have these nuclear device power plants all over the world, and you don't have to worry about anyone converting whatever the fuels they have there into weapons grade uranium or plutonium. So that's a plus thing. And another big thing is you don't have to have anywhere near the safety that you do normally. because of the way it's built, it can be built faster, and it doesn't have to be. It's nowhere near as dangerous as a conventional plant. So what you have here is a nuclear plant that produces a lot of power. In this particular case, this one's going to be producing about 365 megawatts, and that's just the first one. So they could twin that easy and double it once they start these things going. So you have a plant that can be built in 5 years, and it is much safer than a conventional nuclear plant. It's much more efficient and stands to make a lot of power, the kind of power that we're going to need.
It provides energy for about 400,000 homes.
Yeah, that's yeah, I don't like that idea of the homes when it talks about homes, because I remember when they did that here with Big Becky, we're going to get so many homes.
Well, yeah, because what you don't know is industrial use of it, right?
Yeah, what you need to know is how many megawatts. That's the only thing there. And if you remember Big Becky, it went from about 700 megawatts down to about 160 megawatts, and then the government turned the figure into 1.6 billion kilowatts, and oh, that sounds a whole lot better, doesn't it? 1.6 billion kilowatts. Well, kilowatts is what you use at household type of. Right. You always, when you talk about power generation, you always talk in megawatts. So this one's going to be 365 megawatts, which is that's pretty good, you know.
Which can have its output boost to 500 if necessary for short periods of time. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can run at 500 megawatts for peak periods, let's say.
Yeah.
Which is another thing. Nukes, the traditional nukes, have a problem doing. They're great for base loads, but you can't ask them to pick up their power generation during prime time. They're good to fill up that base load, but what you need gas or coal or something like that to fill in for those times when you have high demand times. And that's why most of our coal plants were replaced by gas plants, and everybody thinks they're replaced by wind and solar. Moderately, there was a small amount that did go to wind and solar, but the main thing was it was turned over to natural gas plants, like the one that sits idle now in Thorold.
All right. Okay. So, so that's kind of an interesting thing. See what comments we have here. Okay. Robert saying good morning, right?
Morning.
Yeah, and they still have no solution for the waste. This is what Mike Cushman said.
There's going to be less of it, and the problem here is that is the only viable option at this point. We need to quickly reduce the amount of emissions that go into the air, and the only way you're going to be able to do that is with nuclear power, fission power for now. Yeah, they haven't got the fusion reactors are still 30 years away. Any major geothermal, that's to me that's the exciting one. Geothermal, as soon as you dig into the ground, you start going towards where it's warmer. And once you get to be about 7 or 8 miles down, it's pretty warm, and you can start boiling water down there. And then once you start being able to boil water, you can make a reactor. The problem is how hard it is to get down there. Now, what they've done, some people have done, is use the fracking technology to go down there and go deep enough to be able to frack open cavities that they then can use to put water and boil it, and then bring it back up to run generators. Remember, we have an infinite amount of power, way more than we're ever going to need in the center of our Earth, because our Earth will be vaporized by the sun 4 billion years from now, and when it does, that core is still going to be hot. in our planet. That's enough power for thousands of years of civilization. It's just how to get at it. How to get at it is the problem. In the meantime, before we get those technologies going, we're going to need something that puts out less emissions. And the only thing available really is nuclear. And these particular nuclear, and of course, I'll add thorium too. Thorium is another reactive substance like plutonium that they hope to be using in nuclear reactors, and it has a lot less radioactive waste. So there are many things, and this particular system, they say, has less nuclear waste and is more efficient based on that. So we'll see. I don't know. Nuclear waste. You're going to have to deal with it somehow, and I think it's probably just dig a big mine and dump it in there.
Okay, if only it was so simple. Niagara Falls must spend an average of $57.4 million every year to maintain its existing infrastructure. But the problem lies is it only expects to get funding for $29.7 million a year for the next 10 years. So, which means that there's like a 27 million budget gap per year. And Ruth Ann Nywestag is actually concerned about how we get around this. And she's saying over decades, we keep building libraries, we add museums, we add different things, and then we have to sustain them, which becomes costly. And you know, so she's saying that we need to look at the asset management for the non-core infrastructure, and you know, decide what to do with it.
I can see what she's saying, but I'm not so sure she's quite on with this. And the reason why I'm saying that is because she's come right out and said, okay, well, we've got this the core and non-core or essential assets, and it's costing us more than we're getting from them. And she seems to think we're just going around willy-nilly, setting up libraries and trails and so on.
Yeah, this is the thing that bothers me with this, because she's talking about closing libraries because they're no longer in use. I don't know there's any proof they're no longer in use. She is saying we need to add things like pickleball courts and cricket pitches, because that's part of our changing times. It's about how people want to enjoy themselves today. But it's you know, they're basically, she's also then saying certain parks may no longer be in use because kids in those neighborhoods have grown up. Well, traditionally, kids in neighborhoods, of course, they grow up, but then they bring their own kids along.
Well, I'll tell you that I lived on Ontario Avenue, and I moved in there late 1979, and there was a park 2 houses from, well, 1 house away from me. There was a park, and I watched that park just be empty for years until the old people in the neighborhood died off and the younger people moved in. Then, including my own kids, filled that park up, and that park was used every day. After that, there was kids were going in that park steady. That was one of the most used places in the neighborhood.
But it's that park. But it's a cycle.
Exactly. Yeah. So the idea, well, these parks are the people that are growing up and you don't need them anymore. That's short-sighted thinking, because just like you said and what I said, it sooner or later, when the demographics change again, that park will be used again.
Yeah. In any case, who's to say that older people don't like to walk in the park? I know.
Yeah, they do.
There's plenty of elderly people that love to go walk in the park.
Yeah, it's an open space, so I see her point. I see her point, and then she says maybe we don't need certain libraries, certain other things that we can just maybe downcase or just think of it in a different way that's not as costly, because we just can't keep going back to the ratepayer and keep adding on more and more. I like to point out that the city council looks at these expenditures pretty closely already. They apply a certain amount of money towards libraries and a certain amount of money this and that, and they question a lot of times whether or not certain libraries or certain other places should be left open. The one on Main Street is closed down. The one at Chippewa is going to be closed down because it will cost too much to improve it enough to be to stay there. But there will be library services through the arena, which is another city asset. So I don't know. And 2 years ago, the city approved a management plan for core assets such as roads, bridges, and so on. And now they're being asked, what are you going to do with your non-core assets? Those non-core assets add up to about $525 million, I think it says here somewhere.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the parks, your trails, that sort of thing. The pickleball court, whatever. These are non-core assets, but they do cost the taxpayer money to maintain.
525 million, basically.
Yeah, so I think I said that. And I think I would guess that, and because I haven't got the figures right in front of me, but overall, 416 million, 81% of Niagara's non-core assets are in fair condition or better, it says.
Yeah.
Well, 33 million, 6% are in poor condition, which means they are nearly the end of their life. And 66 million per percent are in very poor condition, meaning they are due or overdue for replacement. So you're thinking of things like park equipment for kids, different kinds of play equipment that you see in the parks for kids to run around in. They changed the equipment in my park that I live by. I was very glad to see they changed the equipment when they did, because the stuff that was there was getting pretty old and well used. So when they changed the equipment there and brought new stuff in, I was very pleased with that. And I've noticed they've done it again in that park. But then again, it was I moved in 1979, so they must have changed it a couple times since. And they redesigned the park too. So.
Yeah,
so they redesigned the park a bit too. So that always lends something to the area to make sure that equipment is more modern. I'm not so sure the equipment that I played on when I was a kid would be used today, because you could climb up these things very high and you could fall off and you could really hurt yourself back then. So I don't think they make things that high or that challenging anymore, because there's a liability issue. But so that's the kind of thing they think of. Like some of the stuff that I played on, if you fell from it, you're going to hurt yourself. And we had very, very high swings, and we were able to climb up on top of the swings right up to the top bar. And of course, we're going to do that, even though you're not supposed to. Nowadays, they wouldn't put a swing like that. We could do that too. So these are the kind of things that I think those are the kind of things you kind of have to look at when you look at your like when they talk about poor meaning they overdue for replacement. Now, I think the mayor says something about it's a lot easier and cheaper to fix something than to replace it. So I don't know.
But also, then they're also saying that 2% of the pieces of equipment are in an unknown condition, either because they don't know when they were installed, or that they've not done an assessment upon them.
Yeah, some of the stuff still needs to be assessed. I got the feeling from watching the mayor talk about this on the council meeting that he figured this is more bureaucracy put upon them by the province. That they seem to think that we need to do this, so we got to do this kind of thing. However, it might not be. Once I start reading about it, I don't think it was such a bad idea in the first place.
No, I don't think it's a bad idea.
Look, I have to go now. I'll say goodbye. I have to go early today.
That's fine. I just think with some of this stuff that we just need to start replacing perhaps some of the older stuff, but we also have to have to look at and we do have to look at where we're doing the spending. We do have to consider that, and that's problematic. And how we deal with that, is something we must, as a city, consider. Because one of the things that Neuersteg points out in this regard is that we've got a spending gap, right? That spending gap is problematic, and how we deal with that is where we have to actually really think about what we really have to think about in the city. Because people like myself, people like many others in the city, have been saying we've been overspending in recent times, and this is just representative of that, really, isn't it? This viewpoint by Neuersteg. So I'm going to do the comments and move on, and then leave it at that, I think. Well, no, actually, you're wrong, Mike. Municipal accommodation tax was never worded to help the city. Municipal accommodation tax was always for advertising the city, was for marketing the city. And well, yeah, no solution for the waste. Yeah. Yeah, and that's where problems lie. Okay, so so I'm going to refer back, Mike, to your earlier comment. Lock him up, lock him up, lock him up. Yeah, and I'm sure we got some other people who will say that that's unjust. The prison sentence was unjust, and I think we'll leave it there right now. I know Dave's just gone, but I'm going to basically break it at that point. All right, have a great day, everybody.